Hello, everyone. Good afternoon. It's my great pleasure to give a warm welcome to Simon Maple. That's going to tell us a bit about tooling and maybe other stories than what we're used to. That'll going to take about 50 minutes. Give a warm welcome to Simon.
Thank you. Thank you very much, and thank you for choosing my session. I'm really pleased to see such a large, well-attended room. Today I'm going to be talking about 10 ways to be a more productive developer, and it was interesting when I put these slides together, actually, because it was really hard to actually just choose 10. What I've actually done is actually thrown a bunch more stuff in there as well, but we'll say it's 10. If you wanted to follow me, at SJMaple is my Twitter handle. Please tweet during the session. I love to see all the tweets at the end of the session, so at SJMaple if you wanted to follow me. A little bit about me, then things I do. I'm actually a developer advocate for ZeroTurnaround, which is a tooling company. We're all about productivity ourselves, trying to produce tools. We essentially find problems that developers have on a day-to-day basis and try and create really revolutionary tools to fix those problems. So that's really my background of what of how this session came about. Who's heard of the virtualJUG? Few people, cool. The virtualJUG is an entirely online Java user group. So I created this a couple of years ago because once me and my wife had our first child, it was really hard for me to go into London. It takes about an hour or so for me to get into London. And it took a while for me to go there, come back. And as I travel quite a bit anyway, it was hard to justify that time. So I created a virtual Java user group, an entirely online group, whereby we meet up a couple of times a month, virtually, of course, and we get some really amazing speakers. People like Venkat's been on a couple of times, Arun Gupta, Heinz Kibbutz, Marcus Isele. In fact, we had James Gosling as well last year. So we can pretty much have anyone, and it only takes an hour of their time. So we can get the best speakers. So virtualjug.com if you wanted to follow that. I created that myself a couple of years ago, and it's got over 5,000 members already, so please do check that out. I'm also a London Java user group leader. I'm big into the community, so I love helping out with Java user groups. For my sins, I'm a Java champion and a Java 1 rockstar, and also Rebel Labs author, which is a content site where we put a lot of opinionated content about technology. Now, this session came about from a report which we actually released on Rebel Labs called 10 Kick-Ass Technologies Modern Developers Love. And the technologies we put into this report are technologies based from a survey which we released. Many of you probably heard of our developer productivity surveys at Rebel Labs. It's a survey that we kind of gather information about which tools developers love to use and why they love to use it, and also just from the feedback that we get from general blog posts and just talking to people at communities. So we'll look through a lot of those. So first of all, what is productivity? How can we improve our productivity? We can do, obviously, some very obvious things to improve the speed of something. Sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't, but we've got to actually understand how we can improve our productivity. By the way, these are new glasses, and I don't normally wear glasses, so I'm really aware that I might fall off the stage at any moment, so please take a photo so I can capture that moment. So first of all, productivity, removing non-essential tasks, okay? Understanding what is non-essential, what is essential, and trying to remove that task. This is a great story. I'm not entirely sure if it's fictional or not. Who's heard of the experiment about the monkeys and the banana at the top of a ladder? Quite a few, not many though. I'll explain it. So they started off this experiment with 5 monkeys. They put a ladder with some bananas at the top, and the other thing they had was a hose which could spray water at the monkeys. And they left them in this room, and all of a sudden, obviously, as you'd expect, one of the monkeys tried to get up the ladder, tried to grab the bananas. What they did was they sprayed all the monkeys. Okay? Next time, another monkey tried to get the bananas. They sprayed all the monkeys. And what actually happened was, every single time a monkey tried to go up the ladder, all the other monkeys jumped on that monkey and started beating the crap out of this monkey because they knew the others were going to get sprayed. Okay? So that was the rule. The rule was in place. But what they then did was they took one of the monkeys out, one of these conditioned monkeys that understood the rules. They took that monkey out, and they replaced it with another monkey that didn't know the rules. Now, of course, this monkey would go straight up the ladder to try and get those bananas. But then all the other monkeys jumped on it and beat the crap out of this monkey again. And so he decided he wouldn't do it. And then they replaced another conditioned monkey with a regular monkey. The same thing happened until they continued so that all the conditioned monkeys were removed from the group. And all the monkeys were there understanding the rule and actually following it through. So if a monkey climbed up the ladder, they would beat the crap out of this monkey. But they didn't know why they were doing it. Okay? Because none of the monkeys had ever been sprayed. So they were doing it because that was the rule. Now, this is very similar when we are in a job. Typically, when we change jobs into a new job, it's very, very easy to say, well, hang on, why are we doing it like this? Okay? That's the best time to actually say, to look at what you're doing and actually understand, are we doing this for a good reason? Is that reason still valid? So removing non-essential tasks is something that should be a continual thing. You should go back to your jobs and actually look at what you're doing and understand why you're doing it. And remove those non-essential tasks if you are doing them for no reason at all. Optimizing existing tasks. Essentially, there are the tasks that do exist that we do need to do, can we make them faster without actually removing the impact of what we're trying to do? For example, in 2005, I used to be a big fan of the nose smiley. Now, 2016 now, I guess, I've improved my efficiency by 33%. Okay? I still need to express my happiness, but I can do it 33% faster now. And retaining awesome tasks. This is very important. Sometimes we can actually overcut what we're actually trying to do. So much so that we actually lose sight of our goal. And this is very important. Speed or productivity is not our goal. Okay? Productivity or speed is just a measure of how fast we reach our goal. So when you try and be more productive, keep in mind what your goal is. Don't lose sight of that. You can't replace your goal with productivity. Otherwise, you're getting to a position you don't want to be. Now, of course, I work for a productivity company. There are plenty of productivity companies here, but I'm going to let you into a little secret. That secret, of course, is productivity is a lie. I'm going to show you a whole bunch of productivity tools, and I'm going to explain to you what these productivity companies won't tell you, why being productive sucks. Okay? But first of all, let's look at the tools. Okay, so communication. Communication is one of those kind of soft things whereby it's very, very important that we communicate. Who works from home here? Who works remotely? Small group of people. Who works in a team that has remote workers, whether they work from home or whether they work a much larger number? I personally work from home. And I have people in my Boston office, people in Estonia that I communicate with. And it's very, very important for me and my team that we all understand what each other are doing and we can communicate in a very simple way. Sharing knowledge across a team is very important. There are two aspects to it. First of all, there is the mindset of being able to communicate, understanding what you need to communicate to your team, and also how you communicate. You do need tools. You do need technology to make that communication better. We're big fans of Hangouts. We're big fans of this. Anyone know what this is? Who uses this? Loads of people. So this is obviously Slack. Slack is a reasonably new chat environment. What other chat systems do people use? Skype? A few. Who's the hardcore IRC chat users? Hey, there we go, one or two. The things I like about Slack is you can obviously use group channels, so you can have focus groups where you talk about a certain topic, but the most important thing for me is the open door chat policy. And by that I mean you can join any group that you want to and leave any group that you want to when you have a reason to talk in that group. So, for example, we will have an engineering, a JRebel, an XRebel, a marketing, a sales, chats. And I don't need to be in all of them at the same time. I just need to be in the relevant ones that are applicable to my role. But when I need to talk or communicate to other people in, say, sales or marketing, I can join that group, type my message, and come back out. Okay, it's so easy to do that. Other things like Skype, for example, you have to be invited in, then you stay there. You know, there's not that easy environment. Also, smart integrations, and this is very useful. We integrate with things like JIRA, with things like RSS feeds, so that when you take on tasks, when you complete tasks, when blog posts go out, we get notified straight away. When issues are created, we get notified straight away in a channel, and you can see exactly what other people are doing. And when other people, create issues or whatever, you can have a chat about it straight away there. And I way prefer these levels of communication to mailing lists, because mailing lists you tend to type a huge amount. Half the time it doesn't get read. It feels very one way because you're not engaging in a quick conversation. Whereas any kind of Slack or Skype or whatever, you get your point across, you get your communication very quickly. Of course, there's Atlassian tooling. We're big Atlassian users at ZeroTurnaround, JIRA, Confluence, and it's not just the fact that you use JIRA for your Kanban or for whatever you want, but the thing that Atlassian do who's not an Atlassian user here? Virtually no one. Okay, there's a few. We're talking like a few % of people. The thing that Atlassian do very well is the interconnection of their tooling. Their tools integrate very well. So if I wanted to create a Confluence document that links or creates JIRA tasks, I can do that. If I wanted to access Bitbucket from Confluence, I can do that. There's a huge amount of engagement between the tools. Okay, so let's talk about tooling now, and we're going to start off with a little bit about application servers. But this is actually a really good GIF. This is a really good image. When I talk to people, particularly about using something like JRebel, I very often hear things like this. I'm too busy to improve. If a tool is there and it can save you a huge amount of time, or it can make your job easier, sometimes it's well worth taking time out of your schedule to investigate what tools are available, to try them out, because in the long run, it will help you. And waiting before you try a tool, say, oh, I'm too busy right now, but I'll be able to do it in a month. Okay? Very often, when people say that, that month never comes, because in a month's time, they'll be too busy. And people tend not to have downtime. So really do make time to try and work out how you can be more productive. So app servers. We wrote a report for Rebel Labs, which is comparing app servers from a developer's point of view, understanding some of the key points which developers use from app servers. In fact, I gave this session on this stage last year at JFocus, and we ranked every single app server. Here are a few things which I've picked out from the report. Download and installation. Obviously, you'll see Jetty and Tomcat very easy to download and get used to. Tooling support. The integration with things like IDEs or the integration with your build tools, very important. You tend to get either the high community users or the or more corporate app servers scoring highly on the tooling support. Docs and community, very important, and the more well-used app servers tend to have the actual documentation about how to really get things working on your app servers. I'm sure everyone here has found an exception on their app server, and they've Googled that exception. And they find that one person called, I don't know, Tom Jackson from 2003 had the same problem, and they wrote it on a forum, but they had no responses at all. And you're thinking, how did this person fix that? It's really important to when you're using tools like an app server or something like that, to be able to have that community support. In terms of performance, we did some basic tests of application servers. Typically, Tomcat was far and away the fastest. Jetty was actually a lot slower than we expected. So here on the table we have Liberty Profile, Tomcat, Glassfish, Jetty, JBoss, and the average for all tools. One point to notice here is that Liberty Profile is actually generally a lot slower than some of the other application servers. And this was because the Liberty Profile at this stage, when we ran the report, was actually quite new. We actually ran it a little bit later afterwards with an 8.5 driver, and it actually sped up very significantly. And this is the Liberty Profile. Who's heard of the WebSphere Liberty Profile? Not many. So who's a WebSphere user here? Not many. Okay. So if you are using WebSphere and you haven't heard of the Liberty Profile, do check it out. It's a very much lightweight, developer-focused application server. And this is actually the stats from my JFocus 2015 session, which is basically we weighted some of the points and we tried to work out what the audience, which application servers the audience would favor. And typically Tomcat came out on top quite significantly. But the problem, of course, is a lot of people go for Tomcat because of its simplicity, because of its speed. But when we look at features, Tomcat is actually very, very low on features. It's effectively a glorified web container. Okay? And a lot of people will use Tomcat and then they'll build it up. They'll think, oh, okay, I need some JPA, I might grab OpenJPA. I need some EJBs, I might grab OpenEJB, and try and put this application server together, this Frankenstein-style application server. Liberty Profile is Java EE 7 compliant now, but one thing I will, in fact, a little bit later refer to is something called TomEE. Who's heard of TomEE? TomEE. Quite a few people. Who's a Tomcat user here? Okay, much, much more. So TomEE is actually a Java EE certified application server based around the Tomcat application server. So it still has the Tomcat speed, it still has the Tomcat look and feel, but it's a Java EE certified application server. So rather than necessarily go for Tomcat and try and build something up, which is very often done because people are trying to go for a fast application server, a simple application server, consider TomEE, which actually doesn't remove the things that you actually need for your job. So it's kind of almost adding that feature set back in. Okay, Spring Boot. Spring Boot is a really interesting project which was released not recently, but it's not too old, and it's effectively it provides you with a necessary application or builds an application for you, which effectively leads very, very little bootstrapping because it's all done for you. Just run applications. It's just run applications because it provides you with a script that you can actually just run. And it'll run in an embedded Tomcat server, and it'll run your application. You don't need to actually import anything. You don't need to build your server. You don't need to deploy. It automatically does everything for you. They state it's production ready, which basically means you get other features such as things like metrics, things like your health. You can actually go to a URL and it'll give you those kind of things, but we'll take a look at that in a sec. And also sensible defaults. You're not expected to push huge amounts of configuration. There's no XML, way. That kind of thing. It does everything for you unless you need to change. So let's have a quick demo of Spring Boot then, and this is also a great quote from my friend Josh Long: "Make jar, not war." So let's quickly mirror and mirror displays. There we go. Okay, so what I'm going to show you, I'm going to start off here at start.spring.io, and this is a great website for actually downloading your dependencies, getting everything that you need ready for your application. Here, what you can basically say is you can choose how you want to build. Let's leave it as Maven. I can choose here whether I want I want to add web dependencies, which is if I wanted to create RESTful web service requests. I just did a Vardin vJUG session, so I can add Vardin and so forth in there. I click on Generate Project, and it downloads me this demo.zip, and I can open this demo.zip. And if I open this up, I can see I have all my source. I have my POM file and that kind of thing, and I can then import that straight directly into my IDE of choice. And my IDE of choice is Eclipse, and I can open this up. I've already actually it's readable just. I've already imported this somewhere. Where is it? Oh, it's called test. Here we go. No, it's not called test. Oh, what do we call it? Ah, demo, there we go. Yeah, I was being blind. So here's my demo application. I can open my demo application. I've added a couple of things in here. I've added an annotation to create myself a REST controller, and I've added this request mapping. This is quite interesting. What we're going to do is we're going to have this mapping at /hi, and I'm going to use a variable here. I'm going to put curly braces and add name, and I can use that variable in this method now. So here I can say @path variable, which is grabbing my input from here, my parameter from my request mapping, and I'm going to use that in my method. So I'm just going to say return that as hello. So I can save this. I can do a Maven install, which will build my project. And what we actually get back, if I go into my, this is already pre-built, so I can go into my target directory, and we get this demo jar created. How do I execute this demo jar? Java-jar. You'd think that, but what actually, if I was to do a less of this, if I was to do less of that, it doesn't look like a jar, does it? In fact, it's actually a bash script. So if I go down, we can see a bunch of script, and then an actual jar. So it's a script with an embedded jar. So all I need to do, in fact, to actually run this is literally // it. And there we go. It's actually running the script, and it is running my embedded Tomcat. It is deploying that application into my embedded Tomcat, and now we have our application. So this is on port 8010. So if I was to go HTTP localhost to 8010 /hi, and let's say Josh Rocks. Let's say JFocus 2016. There we go. Hello, JFocus 2016. So it's really, really simple to be able to get your application up running so you can actually play with it. A couple of other things that we mentioned. If I go to my metrics, this is where I can actually see, in fact, here I can actually see that this hi name has actually been HTTP 200 one time. So I've actually called it once. If I was to go back and call that a couple more times, go forward, refresh that, you'll see now it's been called 4 times in total. So we can get metrics from the running environments. That's Spring Boot. A couple of other things that I mentioned. If I wanted to change some of my configuration, I can just do that directly at the command line. So I can say export server underscore port is, let's call it 8008, and then I rerun. And all of a sudden, my application server is running on port 8008. So I can just change this directly to 08. Hi, still working. And there we go. So we can change things very, very quickly and rerun. Obviously, this is a very basic application, so everything's coming up nice and fast. If you had a much bigger application, it'll take that bit longer. Okay, so that's Spring Boot. TomEE, I mentioned TomEE. You can access TomEE. It's an open source Apache project. In fact, everything that it pulls in tends to be other open source Apache projects. So instead of using, I don't know, Hibernate, it will use OpenJPA and things like that. Gradle. Who's a Gradle user here? And Maven? And let's go Ant. Oh, all the sad, unhappy people putting their hands up. Okay, so Gradle's an interesting one. A lot of people love Gradle. Interestingly, I've heard a lot of stories, or a few stories, about people actually moving from from Gradle back to Maven. Any Vertex users? No Vertex users? Okay, Vertex is a project which has actually moved from Gradle back to Maven. But let's see what Gradle is. Another report actually we created was Java build tools, and this is comparing the major build tools and working out, looking at some speed, looking at the integrations and features and that kind of thing. From that, we actually compared some quick runtimes, and interestingly, I think this is running off the Jenkins, a full Jenkins build. Interestingly, Ivy really took a huge amount of time there. Ivy's not great for pulling down dependencies. It's very, very slow. Maven and Gradle, not too dissimilar, actually. Gradle actually, I'm not sure if we use a daemon there. Oh yes, we are using a daemon there on Gradle. So a daemon, the Gradle daemon effectively keeps this Gradle process running in the background. And as you submit your Gradle builds, it'll use that JVM. So you've already been past the uptime that it takes to bring the JVM up and get Gradle initialized. Gradle is obviously a DSL as well, whereas Maven is XML based kind of configuration. A lot of people are a little bit unsure about whether to try Gradle because it's a Groovy DSL, but Groovy is very, very similar to Java anyway. It doesn't actually take that much to get up and running with it. In terms of integrations, this is actually maybe a year old as well, so this may have slightly changed. But in terms of integrations, Gradle is being supported like a first-class citizen. It's not years ago you would have struggled with the integrations, particularly with app servers and CI engines. But now, Gradle is actually just as supported pretty much. Sometimes you actually have to install it as a plugin rather than being the default tool which already comes with some environments. But that's not too big a deal. IntelliJ users. How many IntelliJ users have we got? Eclipse users. NetBeans. Proper hardcore Uber devs using Vi and Emacs. One. Congratulations, a couple. So I'm an Eclipse user because I used to work at IBM for 12 years. And so I've only just downgraded from RAD to Eclipse, which is saving me many, many hours of my life. And so I actually thought, well, I don't know of a killer feature that makes that makes IntelliJ so much different to Eclipse. So I actually asked the lazy web, and I said, put it on Twitter. Can you help me write a presentation? What are your favorite parts of IntelliJ? And I got a huge number of responses back, and actually very, very few were the same. And it leads me to believe that people tend to use Eclipse. People tend to use IntelliJ because of the feel they get from it. There are small little things that makes their day easier, makes their usage of IntelliJ easier, and rather than one massive feature. Obviously, performance is perhaps one of the big features that you would put out between the two. But I found that very, very interesting. OK, time for another demo. Wasted time. So this is basically removing non-essential tasks. Who's heard of JRebel? Quite a few. OK, so we've talked about builds. Can we remove builds from a process? Is it necessary? Well, what JRebel does is it's a tool, it's a development time tool that removes your build compile and removes your redeploys. So essentially, you spin very, very quickly between your development and your test. You want to write code and you want to see code. Very, very similar to that, I hate to say PHP, but very, very similar to that PHP environment, that Perl, that scripting environment, where you write some code, you test. There's none of this crap in the middle that you don't want to have to do. Let's go straight to a demo. So what I've got here is, everyone loves the pet clinic, right? The most boring demo in the world. Here's my pet clinic. I've got my pet clinic running in Tomcat. In fact, let me see if the server's up. Yep, so I've got my Tomcat server running the pet clinic. So if I go and hit that, HTTP, localhost pet clinic, here's this wonderful little dog and cat that we're also familiar with. If I wanted to make a change, let's start off with a Java resource change. I'm going to change this welcome message, which is actually being pulled out of a messages.properties file from a JSP. So if I wanted to make that change, what I would need to do is first I'm going to go to my messages.properties file, and I'm going to say, let's change it to welcome to JFocus. Hit save. Nothing has been done yet. Nothing has been reloaded. The server doesn't even know I've made this change. But when I next go into my server and I refresh that page, the very next time the resources and classes that have changed get accessed, we will perform that reload from the file system. So if I perform that reload, we then get welcome to JFocus. No redeploy needed, no build, no repackaging, no server restart. So that's what JRebel can offer. We can also do the same, of course, to Java code. So for example, here we have a form which we have validation on every single input box. If I wanted to, let's say, go to that class, if I wanted to remove the validation on this first name field, I can go to my code and I can say, well, actually, let's first do a bit of refactoring because we're developers and we love refactoring. So let's say validate names. That's my new method. And down here, let's comment out this first name. Let's say we don't want that first name. The very next time, of course, we then hit add owner. The first name validation disappears. So we don't need to do that redeploy. We also have great integration with other frameworks. So if you make Spring changes, for example, add a Spring bean, all the initialization will happen for you behind the covers. You don't need to do that redeploy. You don't need to restart servers. And of course, we work with Spring Boot as well. Any questions about any of the tools we've used so far, or any general questions? No? All good? OK, so let's jump straight back in. How are we doing for time? Good. OK, so next. Free stuff. Who doesn't like their shirt? Take a photo of this slide, and we'll send you a new one. You can go to that website, 0t.ee/jfocusjr, and if you do a JRebel demo, we'll send you a free T-shirt. That's pretty much it, no strings attached. I shall change slide when I see the cameras go down. There'll be another slide with that on in a bit. Okay, JBoss Forge. Who uses JBoss Forge? Not many people. Who are the Java EE developers here? A few, okay. So JBoss Forge, one of the things that we don't need to do or that we can automate, which is very, very important, is the creating and the scaffolding of artifacts that are just boring to create, that are time-consuming, that we can make mistakes in creating. And JBoss Forge allows us to rapidly develop our Java EE applications, or our applications in general, by generating all the crap artifacts that are just boring, that we already know what format they're going to take. It does all that for us, so we can actually focus more on the development code and the business code. I'm going to show you a very quick demo of this. Here in Eclipse, you can actually, I've got a JBoss tools installed on the plugin installed on my Eclipse environment, so I can run JBoss Forge from my IDE. Alternatively, if you didn't want to do it from your IDE, you can also do it directly from the command line, so you just need to install that out of the command line. Okay, so JBoss Forge is currently here. I'm in my workspace. If I do ls, I can actually see it's kind of like a command line interface whereby you're in a directory structure. And from here, I can actually see, do an ls, and it'll tell me what projects exist in my workspace. This happens to be a directory as well with these same folders. But if I wanted to create, say, a new project, I can go project new. I can tab to see exactly what I can pass into that. So let's create a project called JFocus Test, JFocus Demo. Let's be original. Top level package. Let's call it JFocus.demo. I can create that. As soon as I hit return, what it's effectively doing for me is creating a Maven project for me, which I can find here, JFocus Demo. In here, I have my usual Maven source folders, and I have my JFocus Demo environment there. Also, in my console, it's actually changed the directory to that JFocus Demo project. If I do an ls there, I can see my POM XML, my Maven POM, my source, and my target. What I can do now is I can create other artifacts. So I can say something like, let's create a JPA entity. What is it? JPA new entity. From here, I can tab, and let's give it a name, and we'll call it my entity. Let's give it a provider. Provider, who have we got? Let's use Hibernate. What else can we do? That's probably all we need to do for now. I can hit enter, and it's going to create me everything I need. So there's my persistence XML, and there's my my Java for it. Now I can actually develop the logic. I don't actually need to do any of the artifact generation at all. If I wanted to, I can go in and add constraints, depending if you wanted to do this scripted. So I can say, I think it's constraint add, and I can say, well, I'm going to do it on property ID, and my constraint is going to be, let's say, assert true, for example. That's a lot of code just to add a single annotation. But if you wanted to script it, or if you had more complex annotations, you won't make mistakes, or you're much less likely to make mistakes when you're doing things at the command line than actually just typing it in manually. Other things I can do, I can now scaffold that. So I can scaffold generate. Whoops. Let me run that again. I can scaffold generate. I can say, what shall I do? Scaffold generate, say target package. I want to scaffold jfocus.demo.star. It's interesting. Oh, it's target. Huh. Demos, hey? Who would do them? There we go. So I'm generating a scaffold, which is effectively creating something that I can then deploy into an application. I can then build this, and if I was to go, which is actually running a Maven build, if I come here now, let's refresh this. Let's refresh. We have things like. We have things like our REST application and other things that we can actually deploy and test our entity. So if I was to deploy this into a container which had Hibernate support, I'd actually get a form which I can then go in, add entities, remove entities, delete things, and things like that. So it's very, very simple to get started, very, very simple to test things that you've created because it scaffolds everything up for you. So that's JBoss Forge. Failing early, and everyone talks about failing early. And I can't remember who said this. I think it was maybe Jonas Boner or someone like this who said, actually, it's not about failing early. It's about learning early. It's about understanding what you can fix as early as you can. Because typically, if you do trip over problems, you, as a developer, are typically going to be the person that fixes that kind of problem anyway when you find bugs. If it's a performance problem, you don't want to have to wait a number of months, a number of weeks before that comes back and other developers have pushed code on top of you and things like that. So how can we learn early? There's a new profiler which is only about 1.5 years old called XRebel. This is a zero-turnaround profiler. And it's a profiler designed for developers. So it's designed for, as you write code, to be able to test your code instantly in a performance environment. Now, it's very important to understand that when you test performance, when you profile your code, you have very, very different measures when you're in a development machine compared to a production machine, because you can't take an absolute value during development and say, yes, I'm going to have that same problem during production. So we have to be very, very careful what we measure. I'm going to show you a quick demo of this. In fact, XRebel has been running as we've been going through our pet clinic application. And every time I click here, XRebel is monitoring what is happening behind the scenes. So for example, if I click on Find Owners, let's say as a developer, I've just created this new functionality, which is to search and filter a number of pet owners. If I click this, we get an amount of data very, very quickly, 11 rows of data extremely quickly. As a developer, I'd say it's working, it compiles, let's check it in. But we have performance problems. And if we look at this, and by the way, this is sample code which we haven't touched at all. If I look at this, I can click in, and we can see that XRebel has told us there are 37 IO requests happening, 37 separate SQL queries happening just to get that small amount of data. I can see this HTTP request coming in here, and I can see our flow through our methods, and I can also see SQL statements. And I can see exactly what is being run through a data source. So if I had a Hibernate request, if I had a JPA request, I will not see the statement that is run by the developer. I will see the statement that is run through a data source. So in this case, we have some SQL formatting, and we're getting a whole bunch of information from an owners table where the last name is effectively a wildcard because we didn't filter on any string. So here we get a pet owner ID, first name, last name, and so on. We can see that this takes a short enough time to run, and returns us 10 rows of data back. What we then see is we run 10 further SQL statements here, and if I click on that, XRebel has grouped them up for us, and I can open these, and XRebel is showing us there is only one slight change between each of the SQL requests. And we can see that what we're doing is we're going into the pets table and filtering on a specific owner ID. And this is a classic N+1 problem, which, you know, if you're a Hibernate user, if you think one line of Hibernate equals one SQL query, then you're entirely wrong, because you can get huge numbers of SQL queries from a single line of Hibernate code. And this is what happens. You effectively have a single SQL query, which you get an amount of data back from a database, let's say n rows back, and then you have n further SQL queries to get more information from another table. That is your n+1 problem. If my first SQL request returned me 1 million database records, I would then make 1 million database SQL requests again. So this is the classic n+1 problem. So what XRebel will do is it will tell us about these problems, it will tell us what is invoking them, and it'll point us to exactly where we can fix that problem. In fact, we're actually a little bit worse here because we then further go into a types database where we make a further 13 calls, which I assume, yeah, we get 13 rows back from each of these SQL I/O requests. And then after that, we make another 13 requests from visits. And in fact, a lot of this code, isn't even being used yet. So we can see on our request flow when we're getting the data. If that's too early, we can fix those kind of things. So it gives us insight into what our application server, what our application is actually doing. There are other things we can do, of course. In fact, we can filter based on our request type, and we can also filter on our I/O types. If we wanted SQL or if we wanted NoSQL, we can decide to filter on that as well. One other important thing is about our application monitoring, our application profiling, should I say. And this is about working out where we spend our time in our application request. And here we can see two ways that XRebel will tell us this. It'll tell us based on the cumulative amount of time that we spend in our request flow. So, for example, we'll start at 100% in the outermost method, and as we go down the request flow, this is going to get smaller and smaller. When we find a method which takes a significant amount of time, XRebel will also tell you how much time is being spent there. So we can see 11% is being spent in this initialize method, another 15 is being spent in this get value. So we can easily see where our potential bottlenecks are. And we give relative values rather than absolute values. So we're spending 15% of our time here rather than X number of milliseconds, because that is more likely to map to a production environment than absolute values. Now, let's say I'm just going to enable one thing, which is called XRebel Share. Let's say, oops, I didn't save that. Save. Now, let's say I wanted to. I found this problem, but I don't know how to fix it. It's not my component. It's not my area. I'm going to create a JIRA and I'm going to send it to someone, and I want them to be able to understand the problem. What I can actually do. Am I connected? Yes. What I can do is I can actually click this button here, which is going to generate me a unique URL, which I can then share. I can paste this URL into my JIRA or bug description, and when I click on that, it'll actually take me to a site whereby I get the same information, I get the same usability from the UI, but I don't need to be running XRebel to actually grab this information. This is effectively a snapshot of my last run. And then other people in my team can actually fix that. This is going to be particularly useful if you're running in a bigger community, an open source community or whatever, and you have lots of people who are maybe casting an eye on it as well. And I can do that for my I/O or my application profiling. A couple of other things that we can do. One is exceptions. So if I was to, let's create an exception. For example, if in owner validator, let's create a new exception here. And this exception is going to be let's say you can't see me. Because all we're going to do is print the stack trace and leave it like that. But this is something which is essentially just going to be noise in your system error, in your system logs. Now when I click on the button which is actually going to invoke that code, rather than entirely ignore that and carry on developing, I get this exception. I can see exactly where this exception is, line 45 of owner validator, and of course we get this you can't see me exception here. This, by the way, XRebel and JRebel do work together, so I can just make my change and then that exception goes away. That's pretty much everything I wanted to show you for XRebel. Any questions so far? Yes, one over there. I think there's a mic coming up.
Sorry, where?
Oh.
Sorry, where?
There was one over here somewhere.
Here? Okay.
I can't see a hand. There we go.
There we go.
Supposed to work? Yeah. Those shares, if I were to share that ring, if I were to have some semi-confidential information there, that would be a bad idea, I guess.
Yes, and so the question is, if you have sensitive information, can you share that? So this is essentially running on ZeroTurnaround hardware, running in the ZeroTurnaround SaaS. So we actually disabled it by default for that exact reason, in case people do have sensitive material, sensitive stuff that they don't want to publish. Our method of development is very much keep it simple. So when we actually introduce something like a share, what we will tend to do is we will provide the feature at its absolute simplest, and then try and crowdsource some information about exactly what people want from it. So we introduced it. We're basically looking at the usage, what problems people have, and then we can introduce more of that. But yeah, if it's sensitive information, that's the reason not to share. But we have kind of security by obscurity in that we create a URL with a unique URL, which is effectively just a bunch of garbage string at the end. So someone would have to guess that. But yeah, you're right. Yeah. Any other questions? No? OK. So let's give away some more free stuff. In fact, this is the XRebel shirt. So if you wanted an XRebel shirt, this is another URL. I'll display this at the end, though, because we're running out of time just slightly. OK, let's jump on to Arquillian then. So Arquillian is almost like integration-style tests, but with a unit test flavor, a unit test look and feel. If you wanted to run your tests, but you wanted slightly more integration-style tests, you don't necessarily want to run just a pure unit test. You don't want to run just mock-ups. You're only as good as your unit tests, really. So Arquillian allows you to take your tests to a container. So you can connect Arquillian to a bunch of different containers, pretty much all the major containers, and kick off your tests in a JUnit style, and view your tests in a JUnit style as well. So how would we use Arquillian? Well, first of all, you have the run with annotation at the top. I can't even see this now, somewhere up there. Run with Arquillian.class at the top above our class. And we have a deployment method. And this deployment method will actually create our archive for us. And we can add all the classes in a certain package. And we can add things like webinf, beans XML or persistence XML and those kind of things. So the first thing we do in our class is we create our archive. That will then get deployed. Because we're running in a container, we can use things like injection, and we can inject our own classes. We can inject other classes, whether it's JPA or whatever we choose to inject, because we don't need to mock these kind of things. And when we actually run our test, it's very, very simple. We have an @test annotation, as you would expect. We then set up our test, we run our test, and then we effectively shut down our test by putting the environment back to how it was, ready for our next test. Very, very simple. And when you run this, you would typically do it through an IDE plugin. When you run this, you will see your typical JUnit environment where you will have nice green ticks or red crosses as to whether your tests have succeeded or not, but you're running against a real container. So, in summary, care about your time. Your time's important. It's the most valuable asset. So make sure you're not wasting your time. Make sure you're not, effectively doing no op kind of tasks. But do it without losing sight of your goal. That's very, very important. Productivity is not worth anything if you're not achieving your goal as a result of productivity. And finally, take time to explore productivity tools. Now, I mentioned productivity is a waste of time, and I'll tell you why. This is now the bit that productivity tool developers don't want you to hear. Productivity is a lie. Don't communicate. When you communicate, all you do is educate other people. When you educate other people, all you're doing is you're taking your value down, because other people are becoming just as good as you. Okay? So all you're doing is effectively making yourself worthless. Don't communicate. Don't use Spring Boot. When you use Spring Boot, all you're doing is you're giving your expertise away. You're allowing, we hear massive stories about automation and people lose their jobs. Don't use Spring Boot. It's taking all your expertise away from you. And don't use TomEE as well. Who's going to support your application servers? Where are these expensive support contracts going to go when you're using something which is tried and tested? Don't use TomEE. The big one, of course, IntelliJ. Who uses IntelliJ? IntelliJ is just Eclipse with a different theme. It's a different color. That's all it is. Okay? Stop using IntelliJ. You're wasting your money. And stop working faster, because who's paid by the hour here, right? We don't want to work faster. We're just taking our money away. Don't fail early. Again, we're taking our money away. If you fail early, you're going to be quicker. You're going to get the job done quicker. We're not, we're getting paid by the hour here, guys. So all in all, please don't be productive. Ignore everything I said about all these tools and just waste your time. Thank you very much, and free stuff.